Welcome back to our study on the book of 2 Samuel. Today we'll be covering chapter 9. But before we dive in, just a quick word of apology that I didn't get the study up and posted last week. Just ran short of time with a whole bunch of things that had been coming together. So unfortunately, the schedule didn't allow for me to get it all video recorded, edited, and uploaded. So with that, we're going to dive into what is a short chapter, which is, like I said, 2 Samuel chapter 9. I'll begin by reading the text for you. And David said, "Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "I am your servant." And the king said, "Is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I may show the kindness of God to him?" Ziba said to the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet." The king said to him, "Where is he?" And Ziba said to the king, "He is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lo-debar." Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, at Lo-debar. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, "Mephibosheth." And he answered, "Behold, I am your servant." And David said to him, "Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. And I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always." And he paid homage and said, "What is your servant that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I?" Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, "All that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "According to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so will your servant do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table, like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both his feet. This is the word of the Lord. Okay, so by way of setup, we see that the end of chapter 8, the list of officials that are given there that rounds out that first section is really sort of a closure, the end of the first account of David's reign. Those narratives that exist in chapters 5 to 8, they do come in chronological order, but beginning with chapter 9 here, we start with a flashback. So the events of this actually, we flash back to get to this portion here. And we're actually moving date-wise. This chapter, chapter 9, starts in the year 999 BC. And for chapters 9 through 20, we're going to be working our way through the events of really what amounts to be the next 26 years up to 973 BC. The reason for the flashback here is so that the reader, that's us, that we would understand what the roles of Ziba and Mephibosheth are when we see the rebellion of Absalom from David. And we're going to pick that up in chapters 15 through 19. So it's sort of skillful storytelling that the author of Samuel gives us here. Sort of backing us up, catching us up to some of the facts, and doing, in a sense, what I'm doing with you right here, which is just a quick word of review. And then by way of the rest of the book, the final chapters of 2 Samuel, chapters 21 through 24, those are some miscellaneous collections of stories. And they don't come to us in any particular order, but the first set of narratives, chapters 5 through 8, those are in chronological order, and then chapters 9 through 20 are for us in chronological order. So, and then, like I said, those last chapters 21 through 24 are no longer in chronological order. Those are just some miscellaneous collections of some stories in there. So, just to sort of set the stage for what it is that we're going to be finding here. Okay, so really the whole first section of this its stage is set for us in verse 1. David is looking to show kindness to Saul's progeny. As we see in chapter 21, if you were to skip ahead or have had you read through all of this, you'll see that he doesn't do this for all of Saul's progeny, all of the children of Saul. This he's doing specifically for Jonathan, the son of Saul. We would say that this was because of his friendship, not just his friendship with Jonathan, but even further than that, it has to do with a covenant that he made before Yahweh. If you want to take a look at that, you'll find that in 1 Samuel 24, verses 21 to 23. That reads, "Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house." And David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. This scene is a scene that's in chapter 24 of 1 Samuel, is a scene in which David makes a promise to Saul that he will not only spare his life, but that he won't cut off his offspring. And David makes good on that. Again, not with all of the offspring, but because of his connection and his love for Jonathan, the son of Saul. There's a little bit of history that I wanted to share with you as well from the commentary. And I'll just read this so that you get an idea of some of the time frame in here. It says, David had fled Saul's court in about 1015 BC. Mephibosheth would have been 5 years old when Jonathan died in roughly 1009 BC. We get that from 2 Samuel 4:4. That's the death of Jonathan. That would place Mephibosheth's birth at about 1014 BC. The last contact between Jonathan and David would have taken place at Horesh. We learn that from 1 Samuel chapter 23, verses 16 to 18. And that would have been circa 1013 to 1012 BC. Therefore, David, even if he had learned of the birth of Mephibosheth from Jonathan at that final meeting he had with him, he still would not have known whether any son of Jonathan had survived to that time, which is why he had to inquire with Ziba and ask about it. So that's sort of the setting of the chapter and why David would have been unaware of the existence of Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, his friend. After inquiring about the whereabouts of Mephibosheth, David found out that he was living with a man named Machir in Lo Debar. That's in verse 4. Machir was still loyal to Saul's house and not to David. And so later what you're going to find is that Machir shows the same sort of faithfulness to David during Absalom's rebellion. And that comes in chapter 17. So it may have been David's kindness to Mephibosheth that won for him Machir's allegiance. To shelter him while he was fleeing from Absalom. So again, these are sort of, you got to do a little bit of jumping around to find this, but this is again a skillful setup in chapter 9 so that you see why some things happened in the later chapters. For instance, in chapter 17, verse 5 of chapter 9, what you'll see is that Mephibosheth shows, certainly due honor to the king of King David. And the reason that he does this is you got to imagine that this would have been sort of a tense meeting between Mephibosheth and King David. Mephibosheth probably wondering, why does David want me? I'm the heir, the remaining heir of King Saul. Is he concerned about me, wanting to reclaim the throne from David? Again, you've seen some of the brutality of this age, and certainly that would have been a potential thing for a king to have done, which would be to protect his throne by eliminating all of the offspring of his predecessor on the throne. But in this case, that's not what happens. David reassures Mephibosheth that this was was for the purpose of restoring property that belonged to Saul to Mephibosheth, and to give him the privilege of eating at the royal table with him, which it says he did to the rest of his life, or throughout the rest of his life. Again, maybe I would throw this out now, which normally I would do at the end of this study, but this is proof positive that David, still acting as a man after God's own heart, was looking out after this and having respect for the office to some degree. Mephibosheth getting to eat at the table with King David is a privilege shown really only to offspring of the king. So Mephibosheth was being treated as a prince. Now we also know, from the very last line in the chapter here, it says he was lame in both of his feet. There could have very well also been, after David met with him, some sort of mercy shown or compassion shown to him, given his situation as well. So the fact that he's being treated as part of David's house would have been a nice thing, always under the watchful eye of David. And maybe, it could have been pity for him, but the other flip side of that is, what do? You keep your friends close and your enemies closer, so that if you keep him close, you keep him dining at the king's table. Maybe this prevents him from plotting against David, and seeking to reclaim the throne for himself. In fact, later in chapter 16, you're going to see that Ziba is going to accuse Mephibosheth of doing this, while being close in David's court. He's doing this so that he could potentially elevate himself to the throne. And yet, despite the risk, we see in chapter 16, David was able to honor the friendship with Jonathan that he had, and the pledge or the covenant that he had made with Jonathan, and keep Mephibosheth close to him, and in spite of the inherent risk that went with it. Mephibosheth, you see in the chapter, refers to himself as a dead dog, and this might be a little strange to us, but most of us realize now, dogs are of course, dogs are better than cats, and dog people, of course, are certainly more kind and compassionate than cat people. Cat people, I know I'm gonna be in big trouble for this, but I'm a dog person, so. But dogs back in the time of antiquity, they were never kept as pets. That was a big time insult. So you cat people, I guess, get a little bit of retribution against us dog people, because dog was a major insult to the people back then. But in a sort of self-deprecating way, Mephibosheth refers to himself this way before David, and it's a way of showing honor to the king and understanding his own role in this. Really, you see in the next several verses then just a recounting of David's kindness that he showed to Mephibosheth. And it's really, I guess it's, in summary, maybe we could do this. It's just a short account of a demonstration of David's kindness, his grace, and his mercy shown or as a faithful follower of God, and one who would show kindness to someone, whether it's because of his lame condition or because of his oath. And I guess in summary of the chapter, serves sort of as a reminder to us that as the scriptures teach, we should make our yes a yes and a no a no. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Act with care and compassion and kindness towards your fellow neighbor, and recognize, in line with Matthew 24, that which you do to the least of these, my brothers, you did for me, Jesus said. And so when we care for other people in such a way, we care for them because God has cared for them. And when we say we're going to do something, we do it. Another piece of this, as I've always done, is where do we see sort of a Jesus figure in this? And I would say it's a fairly simple one to kind of pluck out of here, is that just as David brought this lame man to his table and welcomed him into table fellowship with him, so also the Son of David, Jesus, welcomes us, broken, lame, sinful, not deserving of being given a share in the kingdom, God welcomes us through the Son of David into his kingdom, and he gives to us a share at his table that we are undeserving of. And I think that's a nice way to remember really where all this is going, that David is a type. Christ is sort of the antitype, the fulfillment of some of this, and then we would be, in a lot of ways, the Mephibosheths in the story, where we receive all of those bountiful blessings on account of the covenant that God made, not with Jonathan or anybody like that, the covenant that God made even dating back to Abraham and before, to Noah before him, and even dating back further than that into the garden, in that very first promise of Genesis 3:15, the promise of a son, which is Jesus, the son of David, who would come and rescue us from our sin. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up. We'll get this edited up and posted up, and thank you for your joining us for this study once again. See ya. Bye.